Ma'am, tell me what happened tonight.
Ask him. He's the problem.
You called us. I need your statement.
This is my house.
Ma'am?
You work for me.
The garage smells like motor oil and unresolved tension. Two officers stand in a suburban home where a domestic dispute call has spiraled into something far more volatile than anyone anticipated. The woman in the floral cardigan, let's call her Patricia, has a look in her eyes that's equal parts indignation and calculation. She didn't call the police to report a crime. She called them to win an argument. And now, as the officers attempt to understand what actually happened here tonight, she's realizing that law enforcement doesn't work like customer service. You can't demand to speak to their manager. You can't dismiss them when you don't like their questions. And you absolutely cannot lie your way out of accountability. What starts as a simple question about a domestic dispute will transform into a masterclass in how entitlement collides with the criminal justice system. Patricia believes her home is her kingdom and these officers are trespassers. She's about to learn that when you dial 911, you don't get to write the rules anymore. The badge does. And if you're watching because you love seeing justice served to people who think they're above the law, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. The officers arrived at the residence following a call about a disturbance involving possible weapons. The dispatcher noted that both parties were on the line, which is always a red flag. When a couple can't agree on whether they even want police intervention, it usually means someone is trying to control the narrative before it starts. Patricia meets them at the door with her arms crossed, her jaw set in that particular way that signals she's already decided how this interaction should go. Her husband, a quieter man with the exhausted demeanor of someone who's had this fight 1,000 times before, stands behind her looking relieved that help has arrived. The dynamic is immediately clear. She wants control, he wants peace, and the officers want facts. But Patricia has already made her first tactical error. She's treating this like a negotiation she can walk away from. She doesn't understand that the moment she involved law enforcement, she handed over the power she's now desperately trying to reclaim. Her body language screams defiance. Her tone drips with condescension. And the officers, who have seen this exact personality type in 100 different living rooms, know exactly where this is heading. When the officer asks Patricia to explain what happened, she deflects immediately. She points at her husband and tells the officer to ask him. The officer, patient but firm, explains that he wants to hear her version first since she made the call. This is standard procedure. In domestic situations, officers separate the parties and interview them individually to prevent coordination of stories and to protect potential victims from intimidation. But Patricia interprets this as a challenge to her authority. She doesn't want to be interviewed. She wants to issue commands. She wants the officer to march into her home, retrieve the guns her husband allegedly hid, and then leave. No questions asked, no investigation required, just compliance with her demands. The officer repeats his request. Patricia's face flushes. She's not used to being told what to do in her own home. She's not used to people refusing to follow her script. And that unfamiliarity is about to cost her everything. Because what she doesn't realize is that the officer isn't asking for her cooperation. He's giving her an opportunity to be the victim in this scenario. And she's about to squander it spectacularly. The husband, when finally given a chance to speak, is calm and methodical. He explains that he found Patricia going through their gun safe, removing firearms, and acting erratically. Concerned for everyone's safety, he secured the weapons in an undisclosed location. His tone is measured. He's not angry. He's not defensive. He's simply explaining his actions like someone who genuinely feared what might happen if those guns remained accessible during a heated argument. The officer nods, taking notes. This is a reasonable explanation. It suggests that the husband was engaging in harm reduction, not aggression. But Patricia is incensed. She interrupts repeatedly, her voice rising with each interjection. She insists the guns are hers too, that he had no right to touch them, that the officers need to force him to reveal where he hid them. The legal concept she's stumbling over is joint property versus immediate safety. Yes, if they're married and the guns were jointly purchased, she has a claim to access. But if her behavior was threatening, her husband had every right, even a duty, to temporarily secure them. The officers understand this nuance. Patricia does not. Then comes the allegation that changes the temperature of the entire encounter. Patricia claims her husband put his hands on her, forcefully held her down. This is serious. In many jurisdictions, any allegation of physical force during a domestic dispute triggers mandatory arrest protocols. The officer's demeanor shifts slightly. He leans in, his notepad ready. He asks for specifics. Where did this happen? How did he hold you down? For how long? Show me where he grabbed you. These aren't invasive questions. They're the foundation of probable cause. If Patricia provides detailed, consistent answers, her husband could be facing criminal charges within minutes. But Patricia won't answer. She tells the officer to ask her husband. The officer explains, again patiently, that he needs her account as the alleged victim. Patricia refuses. It's a bizarre power play. She's lobbed a grenade into the conversation and now refuses to explain where it came from or why she threw it. The officer presses gently. Did he hit you? No, she admits. He didn't hit me. He grabbed me. Okay, where? Go ask him. The circular logic is maddening. And it's sabotaging her own claim. The psychological dynamic here is fascinating. Patricia wants the threat of victimhood without the vulnerability of actually being a victim. She wants the officer to act on her accusation without her having to go on record with a detailed statement. Why? Perhaps because her version of events won't hold up to scrutiny. Perhaps because she knows that if she commits to a specific narrative, her husband can refute it with evidence. Or perhaps, most likely, because this isn't really about domestic violence at all. It's about control. The guns, the police, the accusations, they're all tools she's using to dominate her husband and force compliance. But domestic violence investigations don't work that way. The officer can't arrest someone based on a vague, unsupported allegation that the accuser refuses to clarify. He needs details. He needs evidence. He needs cooperation. And Patricia is providing none of those things. Instead, she's growing more agitated, more hostile, and more convinced that the officer is failing to do his job. In her mind, his job is to obey her. In reality, his job is to uncover the truth. And those two goals are about to collide violently. As the officer continues trying to extract basic information, Patricia's frustration boils over into something else. Contempt. She starts questioning the officer's credentials. What's your name? What office do you work for? What's your forte? The questions are dripping with sarcasm, as if she's conducting a performance review rather than participating in an investigation. The officer, unfazed, answers each question professionally. He identifies himself clearly, explains his role, and redirects back to the matter at hand. But Patricia isn't listening. She's testing boundaries. She's trying to establish dominance by turning the interview into an interrogation of the interrogator. It's a classic deflection tactic used by people who are psychologically uncomfortable with authority. By questioning the officer's legitimacy, she's attempting to undermine his power and elevate her own. But the badge doesn't care about her approval. The law doesn't require her respect. And her attempts to flip the script are only digging her deeper into a hole she doesn't yet realize she's standing in. Then the officer asks for her name. It's a simple question, routine, required for any police report. Patricia responds with a false name. Angie, she says, short for Angela. The officer asks for a last name. She provides one. He asks for a date of birth. January 1st, 1996. The officer writes it down, but something in his body language suggests skepticism. Perhaps her hesitation was too long. Perhaps the date was too convenient, a placeholder birthday people use when they're lying. He waits a beat, then asks the question that will unravel everything. Is that your real birthday? Patricia freezes. The mask slips for just a moment. Why does it matter? She snaps. And there it is. The tell. An innocent person doesn't question why a police officer needs their real name and birth date during an investigation. An innocent person provides the information without hesitation because they have nothing to hide. But Patricia has just committed a crime. Providing false identification to a law enforcement officer is a criminal offense in virtually every state. It's often a misdemeanor, but it's arrestable. And more importantly, it gives the officer probable cause to detain her while he verifies her identity. Why do people lie about their names to police? The reasons vary. Some have outstanding warrants and hope a false name will buy them time. Some are on probation or parole and fear that any police contact will result in violations. Some are simply intoxicated and make impulsive, irrational decisions. And some, like Patricia, do it as an act of defiance. It's a way of saying you don't control me, I don't owe you anything, I'm not playing by your rules. It's a petty reclamation of power in a situation where they feel powerless. But it's also incredibly stupid. Because the moment you lie to a cop, everything changes. You're no longer a witness or even a difficult interviewee. You're now a suspect. The officer's focus shifts from investigating the domestic dispute to investigating you. And that shift is almost always catastrophic for the person who triggered it. Patricia has just transformed herself from a potential victim, albeit an uncooperative one, into a criminal defendant. And she doesn't even realize it yet. The officer's tone hardens. He informs Patricia that she needs to start making better decisions or she's going to jail. It's not a threat, it's a warning. He's giving her one last opportunity to course correct, to provide her real information, to cooperate with the investigation she initiated. But Patricia, emboldened by adrenaline and entitlement, makes the worst possible choice. She calls his bluff. Let's go, she says. Let's do it. Take me to jail. It's a dare. She's betting that the officer won't actually arrest her because arresting a woman in her own home over a name discrepancy seems like overkill. She's betting that he'll back down, that he'll decide it's not worth the paperwork, that he'll let her win this round. She's betting wrong. The officer calmly says okay, stands up, and reaches for her arm. And the shock on Patricia's face is priceless. She wasn't consenting to arrest. She was issuing a challenge. She expected him to flinch. Instead, he called her bet and raised it. And now she's about to learn that when you dare a police officer to arrest you, sometimes they take you up on it. The arrest escalates rapidly. Patricia pulls away when the officer tries to guide her to her feet. That's resisting. She tucks her arms under her body to prevent handcuffing. That's active resistance. The officer calls for backup, and his partner joins the effort. They're using pain compliance techniques, applying pressure to joints and pressure points to force her to comply. Patricia screams that they're breaking her arm. They're not. They're using standard control holds designed to overcome resistance without causing injury. But to Patricia, who has never experienced physical enforcement of authority in her life, it feels like an assault. She's outraged. She's terrified. And she's making it worse with every movement. The more she fights, the more force is required. The more force is applied, the more she screams. It's a vicious cycle that only ends when she's fully restrained. Her husband, watching from across the room, tries to calm her. Michelle, he says, revealing her real name, stop fighting. You're making it worse. But she's beyond reason now. She's in full fight or flight mode, and she's chosen fight. Once the handcuffs are secured, Patricia switches tactics. She goes limp, passive resistance. She refuses to stand, refuses to walk, forces the officers to lift and drag her. It's a desperation move. She's trying to make the arrest as physically difficult and visually damaging as possible. She knows that footage of officers dragging a woman across her garage floor looks bad. She's hoping that the optics will somehow work in her favor later, that a jury or a disciplinary board will see this and side with her. But legally, going limp doesn't change anything. It's still resistance. It's still a crime, and it adds to her charges rather than mitigating them. The officers, frustrated but professional, warn her repeatedly. Stand up. Walk with us. You're only making this harder on yourself. She refuses, so they lift her by the arms and guide her toward the patrol car. She's screaming the entire way. About her rights. About her broken arm, which isn't broken. About how they're in her house without permission, which they absolutely have permission to be in. Patricia's understanding of the law is fundamentally flawed, and that ignorance is her undoing. She believes that because she owns the home, she has absolute authority over who enters and who stays. But property rights don't supersede exigent circumstances or lawful investigation. When you call 911 and report a domestic dispute, especially one involving weapons, you're inviting law enforcement into your home under the community caretaking doctrine. They have a legal obligation to ensure everyone's safety before they leave. They can't just walk away because you change your mind. And when one co-occupant consents to their presence, as her husband did, that consent is generally sufficient unless there are specific circumstances that make it invalid. Patricia also doesn't understand that her refusal to cooperate doesn't end the investigation. It just shifts the focus. The officer still has a job to do. And if she obstructs that job by lying, fighting, or refusing to provide basic identifying information, she becomes the subject of investigation rather than the complainant. It's a classic case of someone who knows just enough about the law to think they're protected, but not enough to realize they're breaking it. As Patricia is placed in the back of the patrol car, she issues the threat that every officer has heard 1,000 times. "I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue the department. You're going to regret this." It's the last refuge of someone who has lost all physical and legal control of the situation. The lawsuit threat is an attempt to project future power when present power has evaporated. It's a way of telling herself and the officers that she's actually winning because eventually, she'll get a huge settlement and they'll all be fired. But the reality is far less cinematic. Officers have qualified immunity for actions taken in good faith during the course of their duties. Patricia lied about her identity, which is a crime. She resisted arrest, which is a crime. The officers used reasonable force to overcome that resistance. There's body camera footage of the entire interaction. Her lawsuit, if she even files one, will be dismissed at summary judgment. No attorney will take it on contingency. She'll pay filing fees for the privilege of having a judge tell her she has no case. But in this moment, screaming from the back seat, she believes she's won a moral victory. She hasn't. The husband, meanwhile, remains cooperative throughout the entire ordeal. He provides his identification without hesitation. He answers every question clearly and calmly. He expresses concern for his wife's well-being even as she's being arrested. His behavior stands in stark contrast to hers, and it's not lost on the officers. In their report, which will be filed later that night, they'll note that the husband was calm, cooperative, and appeared genuinely concerned about safety. They'll note that Patricia, who will now be identified by her real name Michelle in the official documents, was uncooperative, provided false information, and physically resisted arrest. They'll note that the original domestic dispute call could not be fully investigated due to her refusal to provide a statement. And they'll recommend charges for providing false information to law enforcement and resisting arrest. The irony is profound. Michelle called the police to make her husband the bad guy. Instead, she's the only one going to jail. Back at the station, Michelle will be booked, photographed, and fingerprinted. Her real identity will be confirmed through the system. If she has any outstanding warrants, which is often the reason people provide false names, those will come to light and additional charges may be filed. She'll be given an opportunity to make a phone call. She'll likely call her husband, the same man she accused of assault just hours earlier, and beg him to post bail. He may or may not comply. If he's smart, he'll consult with an attorney first to understand how bailing her out might affect any future legal proceedings, especially if she tries to revive her domestic violence allegations. Michelle will spend at least the night in custody. In the morning, she'll face a magistrate who will set bond and inform her of the charges against her. She'll be appointed a public defender if she can't afford private counsel. And she'll begin the long, humiliating process of explaining to a lawyer how she turned a domestic dispute into a criminal case against herself. The legal consequences Michelle faces are significant but not catastrophic if she handles them correctly. Providing false information to a police officer is typically a misdemeanor punishable by fines and possibly probation. Resisting arrest can be a misdemeanor or a low-level felony depending on the jurisdiction and the degree of force used. If she's a first-time offender, she'll likely be offered a plea deal. Plead guilty to the charges, accept probation, pay fines and court costs, possibly complete anger management or substance abuse counseling if the officers noted any signs of intoxication, and the case closes. If she insists on fighting the charges, she'll lose. The body camera footage is damning. Her own husband's statement contradicts her claims. Her behavior is indefensible. A jury trial would be a formality resulting in a guilty verdict and potentially harsher sentencing because she refused to accept responsibility. The smart move is to plead out, minimize the damage, and move on. But people like Michelle rarely make smart moves. They double down, they blame everyone else, and they turn manageable situations into disasters. There's a broader lesson here about the psychology of entitlement and its collision with authority. Michelle genuinely believed that her status as a homeowner and a caller to 911 gave her control over the situation. She believed she could dictate terms, withhold information, and dismiss the officers when they stopped serving her purposes. This belief system is rooted in a lifetime of getting her way through aggression and manipulation. It works on friends, on family, on customer service representatives, on anyone without the authority to enforce boundaries. But it doesn't work on police. They're not there to serve her ego. They're there to enforce the law. And when she tried to apply her usual tactics to them, the system pushed back harder than she'd ever experienced. The result was predictable. She escalated until she committed crimes, then faced consequences she never imagined were possible. It's a pattern seen in countless bodycam videos. People who have never been told no effectively have a mental breakdown when they finally encounter an immovable object in the form of law enforcement. Michelle's husband will face difficult decisions in the coming days. Does he bail her out? Does he file for a protective order given her behavior? Does he initiate divorce proceedings? These are not easy questions, especially in a long-term relationship. But her actions have revealed something important about her character and her willingness to weaponize the legal system against him. The fact that she accused him of assault without providing details suggests she was willing to destroy his life to win an argument. That's not a partner. That's an adversary. Many men in his position would walk away and never look back. Some would stand by their spouse, believing that everyone deserves support during their lowest moments. There's no right answer, but the footage from that night will exist forever. And anyone who watches it will see exactly who Michelle is when she doesn't get her way. That's a bell that can't be unrung. Trust, once broken this spectacularly, is almost impossible to rebuild. In the end, Michelle's greatest enemy wasn't the police. It was her own inability to accept reality. She could have cooperated from the beginning. She could have provided a clear statement about the alleged assault. She could have given her real name when asked. She could have accepted the arrest calmly once the officer made his decision. At any of those decision points, she could have minimized the damage. Instead, she chose escalation at every turn. She chose defiance over cooperation, lies over truth, and physical resistance over dignity. And now she has a criminal record where before she had none. She has a mugshot that will appear in background checks for jobs and housing. She has legal fees and court costs that could total thousands of dollars. And she has a video record of her behavior that will humiliate her every time it resurfaces. All because she couldn't let go of the idea that she was in charge. So here's my question for you. What do you think drives someone like Michelle to self-destruct so completely? Is it just entitlement, or is there something deeper at play? Some psychological need to be right even when being wrong would serve her better? Let me know your thoughts in the comment. Do remember to hit the subscribe button, like and share this story, and I'll see you in the next one.